Welcome everyone to the 12 Days of Zentangle 2023. This is our Project Pack number 22, and my name is Martha.
And I'm Molly. I'm very
Molly.
happy to be here. And we are working our way through this project pack, and it is fabulous. And
There is a lot of tangling going on these 12 days.
Lots of tangling. So hang in there. Do what you can. Do not worry about getting everything finished in a certain amount of time. This is your journey. You get to create these on your own pace. So really dig into where you're at the moment. Don't worry about trying to rush through any of it. It's all part of your personal practice, and that's for you to decide how long it'll take. So we are talking about spirals here.
A lot of spirals.
Lots of spirals.
We're going down the rabbit hole with this project pack.
Yes, we are, round and round. Really cool pre-strung tiles we're working on with these new 5x5s, and all of that information is in our introductory video, which we highly recommend watching before doing any of the lessons in this project pack.
And of course we have these beautiful new tiles and a great package of tools that we've hand-picked these gorgeous colors. But if you don't have this project pack, we would love for you to join us with whatever you have at home.
You ready to get started, Ms. Martha?
I'm ready.
All right. So before we put pen to paper, one thing that we all like to do here as part of our Zentangle practice and part of the 8 steps of the Zentangle method is to first honor gratitude and appreciation. And just for a moment, you can take as long as you want, of course, because you have a pause button. But we do invite you to take a moment to perhaps close your eyes, take a nice deep breath, to really just stop and acknowledge something you're grateful for in this very moment. And when you're ready, we invite you to grab this tile we have here. This is a really cool spiral, or a variation of a spiral, that's made up of circles that are gradually aligned in a certain way. And is this actually a geometric inspired string here? And it does create for some really cool things. So I am going to start off with my brown Micron 05 here. And I'm going to be working predominantly in this space right here that leaves the largest orb kind of open, but I am going to actually just start in the middle with a variation of a tangle we call, I would say it's a variation or a hybrid tangle of maybe pepper and spoken, but we're kind of like taking a few tangles and blending them together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an orb in the middle of this first, and feel free to watch first. And it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, because I think it can be, because this is going to be kind of like our first one. And then I like to, when I'm doing this tangle, I like to think of the number 9, because instead of my next stroke coming directly off this orb, it's coming off of it, like wrapping around and coming off of it like a number 9 would come. And I mean like this. So it kind of looks like a number 9. And then instead of just leaving that plain, I'm going to kind of put a little weight at the bottom of it. And then I'm going to continue to come off of that orb. And this is a really tiny one, but as we get bigger, it'll start to become kind of working my way around. Adding a little weighting. Maybe a little curve as I work my way around. something like that. Yeah, you're right, it does actually look like a peppermint.
It's actually very sweet there in the middle.
Oh, very sweet. So now we're gonna work this next one pretty similar to like we have just did that one, but we're gonna use this larger orb as our starting point. So I like to start somewhere in the middle and then we'll go both ways, but I'm kind of going to, my first stroke kind of being that like number 9, right? And then add a little weighting. And I'm gonna go this way first, wrapping. And it's almost like kind of gradually turning your tile as you work. So you kind of have these stripes feeling like they're kind of twisted, almost if you had taken something and twisted it, and all these, if they were beginning straight and something happened, you're twisting it around. All right, let's try the next one. So like I said, I like to start in the middle because I think it is easier. So first stroke kind of goes twisting this way. You have that number 9 stroke as the first one. You can always go back and make ones in between. So I'm like, maybe I'll go back and add one to make them closer together. Might put one other one in here. Decide how dense you want it. Turning your tile each time. I'm gonna start a new one. Again, starting with that sort of number 9 in the middle, somewhere in the middle, little nice stroke. So you get this, see how you have that visual? Can figure out what kind of spacing you want, and like I said, you can always go back in and put ones in between or decide you want them more spaced out. Twisting our way through. All right, let's see here. Last one. So it's kind of already creating an interesting little, almost looks like a crazy spiral staircase.
Yeah, it's dizzying.
So again, we're gonna start, with that number 9 stroke here. So on this last one, because it's getting so big, I'm gonna do a little bit of a different technique. You can join me if you want, or if you've got your groove on, then you can keep going. So I did my number 9 and I went this way. I'm gonna actually do a second kind of number 9 stroke and go this way again, just because it's so big. So I'm gonna start here and then go this way. So it might have a little bit of a different look, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be. I think we're gonna play around with how it kind of all comes together. When I've played around with this a few times, and I felt like I did it sort of like how I play with Senna, where I kind of let the strokes kind of evolve on their own instead of trying to force them, and I got a little more interesting kind of movement in the whole thing, rather than trying to equally space them out and worry about that. Found that in general with my work, if maybe I have a little idea in my head, but then I leave space for it to evolve on its own, I have a lot more room for discovery and maybe unexpected things to happen instead of forcing things.
Kind of goes back to that unplanned element of Zentangle. It frees you up to not feel like you're going to make a mistake or a misstroke, if you will.
Right? So I'm kind of doing another layer of that, starting a little over and moving. With the smaller circles, it didn't seem to be such a big deal, but once I got on this bigger one, I was like, I think I'm gonna kind of bite off chunks as I go. Just kind of touching up some of the strokes, see where I'm at. So this is a really fun spiraling craziness here.
Molly, this looks amazing, and I'm already envisioning how we're going to kind of embellish this later on with some color and some graphite. It's going to be really incredible. So I am going to now pick up my 01 black pen and start to create a border around this beautiful orb of dizziness here. With the black pen, I'm basically going along the string line and outlining the orb. You definitely want to turn your tile basically every stroke so that your hand is comfortable and your stroke is confident and deliberate. You can play around with what feels most comfortable, whether it's drawing away from you or pulling towards you. And now we're going to draw, well, actually a series of auras to create some borders. The way we're going to start the border is we're going to take off from this baseline, if you will. So I'm taking off here, following that faint string line and creating a border. It's almost as wide as my pen here. Really taking my time and working on creating a consistent aura line, turning the tile as I go. And then landing on the string line and eventually on that orb line. Now within this border, we're now going to divide it in half. So I'm kind of going to start where I started before and divide this border space down the middle. And landing on that line that we started with. All right, so now that we have this space divided, we're going to put in some lines to create a border that is borrowing from jonquil and those V-shaped lines. And I kind of like to start somewhere in the middle and then work my way around in either direction.
I agree with you, Martha. That definitely helps when you're working with...
especially when things get a little dicey there down at the bottom. So we'll start somewhere in the middle and draw a nice deep V. And then use that as our guide as we go around the spiral. And turning the tile every few strokes, trying not to lose sight of that V. And now we'll continue on the other side. I remember I got a book from the library when I was a kid that had all these types of optical illusions, and it was my favorite book. I would take it out multiple times. I always thought it was such a cool feature. All right, so now we're going to fill in every other space on each side, alternating like a checkerboard. Continuing with the black, and if you wanted to use a larger pen to fill in your spaces, you're very welcome to do that. Down here where it's small spaces, I'm definitely going to stay with my 01, and perhaps I'll switch it out when they get larger. And you'll form your own rhythm of how you're filling in your spaces, whether it's back and forth or all along one side. Enjoying.
Love it when you add the drama and it just starts to like sort of make this definition and the composition so quickly.
All right, so we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, just almost to the end of filling in our jonquil border. I actually love getting into that, just inking in and zoning out.
Inking in and zoning out.
Inking in and zoning out.
Love that.
All right, so now we're going to actually draw another aura line. We're just going to create just the finest aura here, just to kind of separate this jonquil border from what's going on next. So again, sort of taking off from our edge, I'm really going to take my time here and focus on a very narrow aura line. Turning the tile and just slow and steady, appreciating the subtle hand-drawn, let's call them perfections rather than imperfections.
Love that.
So we've kind of given that a little bit of a space there. And before we move on, we've got this gorgeous big moon-shaped space left, and we're going to divide that into sections that we can later fill in. I'm going to draw some pretty narrow bands, kind of borrowing from that same aura space that we just drew. Maybe cap that off.
A subtle
I'm
rounding
draw these,
up there.
yeah, radiating bands. But as we were saying as well, so you want to start to create this symmetry between things and different elements of the tile. So as I said, working on the same aura line space as that last border, you start to get these different parts of the tile start to talk to each other, if you will.
A subtle turn of the tile to help you kind of align where it is you want to go. A little baby one.
A little baby one. Now that I have these bands down, I do want to add one more element to the border space. And I'm going to draw that border sort of behind the bands, if you will. So taking off from my original takeoff spot that I've been working with, I'm going to draw another fine border, but I'm going to draw it behind the bands that we just drew. fine border, working with a similar aura space, building our layers. And in that border space that we just drew, I'm going to fill it with nice round orbs. And I notice that if I go slow enough, just that extra hesitation on the paper will ink in the space a little bit more. Kind of fills in any cracks that the orb doesn't fill. Anytime you create orb spaces, it's sort of this opportunity to leave a space that's highlighted. You know, you're kind of setting aside a wide open space for light or for shading. I have these little ones over here to finish up with. All right, so next we're going to start to fill in these cool fragment spaces that we've created.
All right, Martha, I love what you've left me with because it's just like has my brain kind of spinning on what we can do. And a lot of times in a Zentangle tile, I sort of look at the strokes we've already used and then play around with repetition. So I think what I'm loving is sort of this jongle thing you're doing. And I don't want to repeat jongle again, but I'm going to play with those kind of zigzag strokes and then see how I can react to it. So doing this like a little bit different, but I think I'm going to use my brown 05 again. And actually, before I start drawing, I'm going to add, this is something I think we can easily add a little bit more string lines because these are looking really open to me. So I want to take my pencil and just kind of divide up each one of these spaces in half to use as a reference. Nice and light, just enough for you to see it, like super light. And on these pre-string tiles, you can choose to do that, add more lines to your string to play around with. So Martha put in these cool sort of like separators, but I thought it would be neat to draw a zigzagging pattern that kind of fell behind it, just because we can, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark, I'm going to start in the middle here. I'm going to mark the halfway point of this line with my pen. And I'm going to skip and do every other like that. I'm going to just mark the halfway point. Again, just kind of like playing around with how I can come up with formulas or things too. And this one is like, so I'm just going to actually pretend that it's halfway, kind of going like that. So I am going to start to draw my zigzags, but I'm going to go from this point down to that halfway string line. So I'm going to create something like that. And then again down to this halfway point. A lot of times you can draw those lines in the air first. So it's just playing around with how a pattern can go behind other patterns. So drawing it in the air, this point to that halfway point. Almost kind of ignoring these bands. Drawing that line in the air first. So by putting that point down, I was able to give myself a reference point. Again, drawing that line in the air first. And so I'm wanting to go to the pencil line, not the band. It's just a little bit of a kind of way to trick our eyes a little bit. And this one is going to be obviously go off the page, so I'm just going to pretend I know where it's going, but I really like the, that drawing it in the air first to see where your lines go.
That's a tip you can use with any type of tangle, especially when it's new to you, is kind of giving yourself that imaginary line first to see where it lands.
All right, so now we have these sort of diagonal lines that are falling behind these bars, which is kind of interesting. And I'm going to use that as my base to kind of carry the rest of the pattern. So the next thing I'm going to do is just aura these lines. I'm going to keep my kind of flow going by creating an aura. Nice fine aura. Goes all the way around. Remembering to breathe. Take your time. And that one kind of fell off, so I'm just going to let it kind of, almost like it curved over the edge there. And you know what? If you had decided to just do your zigzags inside these little areas, that would be fine too. I'm just opening up ideas and options for you guys, how you can play around with different spacings and create layering and all kinds of fun stuff. So just remember that when we kind of give you guys these options, it's just one way to do it. It's not the only way to do it. So I'm going to create another aura inside this time, and you could do it the same width or you can switch it up. It's up to you. Kind of working down now. So now I think I'm going to play around with adding a little kind of texture in these spaces here. So just to kind of mimic what we did in here, I'm going to play around with a little bit of striping. Maybe it has a little weighting on the ends. So this area right now, I don't know if it's like a particular tangle. We're kind of like putting together different tangled components. Martha, would you say like?
Yeah, I mean, this is a fragment area, so
Yeah.
Whenever you have these open spaces left behind, you can fill them with similar tangle elements, and we kind of call it a fragment. I love how just that little bit of extra ink at the end just really anchors those kind of stripes.
And you can sometimes play around with, we call this weighting because, with multiple reasons, but sometimes you can just put a little weight on your pen and you get that naturally. Other times you can kind of actually add a little more ink. So that filled in pretty quickly. Now I'm going to add another thicker aura up here just to kind of space this out a little bit. So I'm going to put another dot right here just to kind of play around. And you can put a dot here if you want to see like how much space above each one you want to do, and that might be a good way to do it. So let's just put these two together to see what happens. It's a nice kind of way to be like, I'm going to land there. And then the same thing here, I can put a dot here with that similar spacing. Maybe that's helpful for you. Nice way to do it. I will often do that with kind of to get my spacing. It was about that much distance, about that much distance. It helps create a place to start and stop. Okay, and one more last line before I hand this over to Martha is just gonna do another really thin aura. So it's just playing around with auras. You can do thick and thin, and it kind of separates your tile out. Drawing auras is such a great meditation, just kind of following the previous line, taking your time. This is all from that original setup we did. So we have some cool stuff going on now, and I'm gonna invite Martha over here to add the next layer. I love how this is coming together. Thank you, Molly.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna continue with the brown 05 pen, and also with this, working with the kind of zigzaggy line inspiration, if you will. So in this section here, where I have the zigzag that goes to a low point, I am going to add another zigzag, this time between the bars. Go to the edge and down to that point. And I'm going to do that in every other space where there's a low point here. So here we're going to the edge and down. All right, so from here, I'm going to follow along with the idea of aura and draw a fine aura. That is a fine aura.
It's very fine.
It's a very fine aura.
So you kind of see how these all kind of borrow elements from each other, but they're all configured in a slightly different way. So my last aura that I'm going to draw is going to be maybe twice the distance of the one that we just did. Just offering a little bit of a different width to create some interest. Okay, so again, with our kind of continuity of everything that's going on here, I am also going to draw some radiating stripes.
Kind of feels like a little Munchkin-y.
Yeah, just that little bit. Each of us has a slightly different style, and you can kind of see that. And knowing that your style is also going to be its own unique style. So maybe you draw your stripes a little differently than Molly and I. That's kind of the best part. In these smaller areas, sometimes you just have to have the suggestion of what's going on in the other spaces. So for the next layer of zigzaggy lines, I'm going to now go working behind these brackets again. So I have this peak here, and I have this peak here. And I'm going to start here and go to the point, and here and go to the point. So midway up this line and midway up this line.
We're basically repeating, but they kind of, at this point now, they're back to matching up with the bars, yeah. It's like a sun.
So I'm working behind each bracket. So midway from here and midway from here.
Each time just picking what you're going to do next, where they're going to meet up.
And what are we going to do next? Well, you guessed it. I'm going to draw an aura, but you see the aura won't get to complete itself.
And it doesn't really matter how you do your aura, just as long as you're consistent. So she's chosen kind of like a spacing and then does the same thing all the way around.
And you can only go as far as you can go, so your tile may be saying some other things to you. And once again, I'm going to go and inside these triangle spaces that we created, I'm going to once again do these sort of weighted stripes. If you make a stroke that doesn't look like my stroke, well, just keep going with it and do it the same way on each space. It's really all about repeating whatever that stroke is. Just repeat it.
That's awesome. Patterns are a beautiful thing, and they're all about repetition and layering. And I find that if you let go of expectations of tangles having to be a certain thing, it leaves open these options for tangulations that still can work, you know? So if you have an oopsie or you go in a direction you didn't intend to, just pause for a second and perhaps keep doing it.
So remember when we did this last layer of triangle sort of rays, we did this little aura here. So I am going to add some orbs in those spaces. All right. So everybody's going to have sort of different amounts of bits left here around the edges. And so for whatever you have left on your tile, I am going to pick up my black 08 and I'm going to ink in this remaining section here first by outlining it and then carefully inking it in.
Make that pop. And if you wanted to do something else in that space, that's fine too. We were just thinking to provide like a layer of sort of background with all that brown ink. The black really pops.
Yeah, it's like a supporting role here. You get to choose where this is going to go. So you're going to have some little areas that might look a little different than mine. And just make a decision on where that inked in area should be. There's so much going on this tile, so many lines, that sometimes this is kind of easy on the eye to just have that solid ink space. Remembering that it'll take a few moments to dry. So you'll see that I filled in all those other little bits and now just putting the finishing touches with that black around the edges. I kind of love how that adds to it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to cap this pen for now. And picking up this kind of blue-green jelly roll that we have, I'm going to ink in with this pen all the little cute little orbs that we have drawn. I'm actually going to start with the ones we did on the outer edges first, and then work with these ones in the middle, being mindful, of course, that the jelly roll takes a little bit of time to dry. Wanting to get any little bits off the edge of my pen. And then with just a slight touch, filling in those orbs. And they don't have to be filled in to the very edge. It's like putting jewelry on our tile here. Turning the tile, appreciating all of the work you've done so far. Very tiny orbs.
Just a delicate little dot, but it adds a nice detail.
Making sure I don't touch the other gel ink. Seems like a long time ago when we started this whole circle of lines and stripes, bits of ink, all of it coming together. Now I'm just going to let this dry for a minute, and then we're going to get to add some shading and some color.
I think we're ready.
Yes, so let this dry for a few moments, and then we'll get ready to work with our pencils.
All right, we have given this a little bit of time, so the jelly roll seems to have dried, and we're going to start to add a little, or a lot bit of shading, actually. Let's do a lot bit.
I don't know if you've ever done a little bit of shading.
That's true.
Molly's likes the shading.
I think I am going to start with my yellow. I'm going to layer this down a little bit, but I'm going to start with my...
Like ochre, is that what it's called?
You're right,
Yeah,
it
the
is
ochre
called
pencil.
Yellow ochre, after all, yeah. So I'm going to start going really over where, and I might even go this way, going over sort of this part that is weighted, using the side of this pencil. I wish we had every color pastel pencil in half-size pencils.
Like our mini pencils, it's the perfect size.
Before we had mini white charcoal pencils, Julie loves this story because it was one of her first jobs at Zentangle. We actually took the pencils to a bandsaw and we cut them in half. It was a little bit of a disaster, and because we wanted mini white pencils, and then Julie had to sharpen them all and they were all breaking. It's much better to have these little custom pencils, but you have to start somewhere, and we were making prototypes and using them. All right, right now I'm just putting the yellow on the weighted side, so I'm going to go to my next layer. And then the next layer. And then it gets a little smaller. It's almost like just one stroke in the center there. Then finding the tortillon corresponds with your yellow, and again using the side, nice soft circular motion. So even that just like wakes it up, right? So that's kind of fun.
Crazy.
I'm gonna do just a little bit of this brown for depth. Not a lot. I'm not gonna do it everywhere. Just kind of do it here and there, skipping around. Doing a lot less than I did of the yellow, just in a couple places, just to add some, I think, some modeling and a little bit different layers. So again, using the side of my tortillon, as you see, the brown kind of creates a little bit of something different going on. All right, so next is my graphite layer, and this one I'm going to be a little more specific with. I'm going to go right to the edge to where the black is. Again, using the side, but I want to get right to the edge, so I'm using a point. And I think I'm just going to do one area at a time to kind of see where I'm at. So I'm going to do this first big circle. Taking my tortillon, blending that edge. And this time I'm going to also add graphite to this other side of the orb. So with the pastels we were only hitting one side, but this time with the graphite I'm going to hit kind of both sides, and I like to do them separately. I guess you could do it at the same time, but when I'm shading I tend to work a little bit, blend so I can see where I'm at. It's coming alive.
Oh my gosh, the graphite somehow makes the other colors just actually so much more vibrant.
Right? So now I'm going to do that other side of the line using the point of my pencil right to the edge. Again, blending as we go, kind of figuring out which tortillon you're using. All right, next layer. So again, with the graphite, I'm hitting both layers. I'd like to do them separately because you get the darkest next to the line. So see, I'm just going back over that original circle line to get that definition. Next one. Now when I get towards the middle, I'm kind of just sort of going around the circle area. I can do both of these at the same time. It gets so tiny. And when you're doing any sort of shading, remember if you fill it all in, then you lose your highlight. So just being very careful to keep that highlight. Add a little bit, a little yellow in a couple places if you want to bring the yellow out a little more. Just near the edge. You can always add more, I can't take away, so I'm just adding it here afterwards. And I'm seeing like I want a little more shading right here. That's looking like it needs a little bit. So it's good. It's a lot of shading.
Shh, Martha.
She's making faces at me. This is like, pow. You can always choose to do less. And then this last bit, I'm going to add just a little bit with the white charcoal, just right over where it's already kind of a natural highlight that we've left. Just to kind of mute where the brown is there, kind of helps with the highlight. And I think right in the middle there, I'm gonna fill that in with black just to make it a little more dramatic. Never too much shading, never, Martha. All right, so I think we have that middle part done. It's kind of jumping off the page here. And let's hit some of these other areas. So with this jongle, I'm just gonna actually very simply just shade one side. And just for some variation, you can kind of just probably hit like just the middle like I am. And then we'll blend it out with our tortillons, and that makes a really dramatic zigzag. Trying not to get anything in that aura because it's kind of nice to keep that really white and get that contrast. All right, so now we're gonna hit this outside area. Let's see. So I see these areas as kind of an opportunity, and they do kind of speak to what's happening here. So I think what we'll do is kind of mimic a little bit with what we did, whereas we kind of hit with the yellow down by the bottom here. And this moves around a lot, so you can kind of just put it in a couple of places and then let the tortillon do all the work.
Is it okay to say this reminds me of one of my prom dresses?
Oh, does it? I think so.
The colors really do. It's gorgeous.
So gold tones.
Gold and black and peach.
So nice how the pastels kind of just move around on the paper, add these subtle variations. Oh, wow, that's coming alive. I love this. Love all the layers here. And if you want to add a little bit of richness with the brown, you're welcome to, you know, maybe just a little bit here and there. Just, you know, if you're so inclined, just to kind of add a little definition. I just added a little bit, just kind of vary up the color a little bit. I'm gonna play around with the with sort of the zigzaggy thing. So we had those original pencil lines we put down, and I'm gonna play around with going back over those, which is kind of crazy. I just right over that pencil line. And I'm doing like a pretty bold stroke and then softening it up as I just to go to one side, just only one side. And then fading that a little bit, which is kind of cool. So this is just one option. It's just a layering technique. So I'm going right over this pencil line just to one side, a nice hard line, and then kind of giving it a little bit of thickness, a little lighter as you work to that one side. I'm going to my right. This is like a little bit of a sort of like transcending. It's a shading technique where you kind of go right over something in sort of a curious place. Couple more. Sometimes I go over them just with the point of my pencil at the end to get that nice sharp edge. All right, so we're getting all kinds of layers here. And then if you want, right before we finish off, I'm gonna kind of put a little pencil on either side of these original spikes Martha put down. turning your tile here and there just to see what makes sense, more or less. All right, so that really actually changes so much. And it's up to you. You can play around with a little bit of here, maybe just take your tortillon and, because you've already got so much in there with the layering, if you want just a little reference. Sometimes I do that. I don't know if it needs too much though. There is so much shading going on already.
It's time to put down the tortilla.
I know, Martha, they want a full, they don't want me to give them like half shading. They want full shading because you can always like turn it off. Are you guys done?
I think it's amazing.
You see what I have to put up with?
I'm teasing you.
Well, I think we should rewind it and see what it looked like 2 minutes ago. I think this looks like,
I think we could.
this looks like a tattoo. Somebody's gonna want this.
Yeah, no, it's incredible.
Yeah, I think I want this. Put this on my arm. Pretty cool. Well, it was a collaborative effort anyway. So, you ready?
Yes, what's the last step here?
I hope you guys enjoyed this. We enjoyed it. It was fun. I can't wait to see what you've done with your 5x5.
Yes, please
Martha and
do
I
share it with us.
had a blast with you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Take your time. Enjoy every step. Take care, my friends.